The Lampadati Viseris, a car so volatile, so nonsensical, it would be like imagining a stereotypical Italian mobster with a twangy southern drawl of an oil tycoon. Better yet, envision an authentic dish of pasta with a thin garnishing of tomato sauce. And no, not the ketchup paste. Complemented with a jumbo-sized diet sprunk and fries. The Viseris is a perfect example of a childlike ambition that somehow remained untainted by the conventions of practicality and reality. Right at the beginning of the 70s Malaise beige era exists the Viseris, a fusion of Italian exotic excess and American bullish brutalism. Where do we start with this thing? Well, for starts, the Viseris' roots are firmly planted in the more than fertile soil of Italy. The heritage of the car shares a semblance of DNA with its creators, which harkens back familial generations in Argentina. Additionally, the Viseris borrows from the Latin vernacular meaning vision, or to see in the second person, and the pronunciation of which is kind of inconsistent. Whether it's Viseris or Viseris is a whole thing. Though Lampadati Viseris admittedly sounds more Latin, the public reception of the car ever since its debut has kind of cemented itself as Viseris in the tongues of the masses. But this isn't Latin 101. Books closed. On the coattails of the 1960s, the early 70s saw a dramatic shift in the economy and dominant culture. The automotive sphere still held its respective design stereotypes in the various hemispheres of the globe. The West held steadfast to the weight of its American V8, Europe stuck to its laurels in compact inline 4s and flat 6s, and Japan began to understand its Western markets, gradually upsizing efficient engines from that of motorbikes and adapting European ideals to their own respectable inline 4s and 6s. And then there was Italy, a country as familiar with cars as it was tractors, confident in pumping out engines ranging from 4 cylinders to 12, long after the 12-cylinder engines of America's automotive youth. If America's export in the early 70s were bombs and soldiers, Italy's export was bombastically sculpted fragile machines of speed. Machines which were emblematic of an owner's status and were imbued with the racing heritage which more oftentimes followed the resemblance of an Arena Wars livestream than it did a Grand Prix. The genesis of the Viseris came from nearly a decade of one-upmanship amongst its Italian rivals Grotti and Pegassi. Pegassi's attempt to cut out a portion of Grotti's market with the Monroe inspired Lampadati to follow suit and answer the call with the Casco. This Italian game of three-way ping-pong would rage through the 70s and into the 80s as well, and the Viseris happened to be Lampadati's next swing. As was typical for the Italian sports car companies, Lampadati found itself in need of funding for its next project, so it searched abroad for an engine to be married to the car's sleek stature. Lampadati found itself in talks with the Vapid Motor Company, as the American Titan was in desperate need for an in the exotic market. Vapid's sudden interest in exotic cars was attributed to its lack of a marketable competitor for De Classe's Invedro brand since the Peyote. As such, Lampadati found itself its engine for the Viseris. The Vapid Source engine was a massive V8 which sported double-barrel carbs with a single cam which would appear in a rear engine configuration, linked to a 5-speed drivetrain. Another commonality among exotic supercars was their lack of reliability, which for Lampadati was about as troublesome as you'd expect. Glaring issues required serious mending in order for the car to not burn itself or shake itself apart. The former was caused by an overwhelmingly common overheating issue thanks to Vapid's engine. The latter came from the suspension issues, which gave the Viseris some unexpected qualities, though these were recalled and fixed quite early on in the car's production cycle. In the shadow of its many rivals like the Torero, Turismo, and even the Rapid GT, also sporting a V8, history was not as kind to the Viseris. Many will enter the world and leave for the next without any knowledge of its existence. In a fringe market, which became exceedingly popular to the upper 1%, Lampadati's esteemed road car never quite came as close as its rivals, even losing much of its spotlight to Lampadati's far more successful rally-bred cousin, the Tropos. Lampadati's machine shared its engine not with the road-going cars, but with Vapid's pedigree in stock car and endurance racing. As such, the Viseris can burn tires like an authentic Chinese takeout burns incense sticks, but its tire width, engine layout, and profile makes the car as fun to drive as it is to pronounce. Is the Viseris a reasonable vehicle to own? Well, looking at its performance and general appreciation, and of course not. The real question you should be asking is if the Viseris is a worthy collectible. What you should consider is that the Viseris holds a unique position in automotive history, one which leaves Lampadati's efforts as a mere footnote on the page of 1970s exotic supercars. Clearly, Toreros, Turismos, and Cheetahs will remain undisputed poster cars of their generation, though the Viseris will forever be known as the one that got away. If you ever show up to car shows, people will look at you in a mixture of bewilderment and awe. The Viseris dared to be different from its 12-cylinder playmates. A history of obscurity will render the car a hidden gem, rather than the ad nauseum stereotype of a Liberty City hedge fund manager. What does this mean then? Is that it? Well, sorta. Lampadati would proceed to study its market and build many examples of controversial automobiles, as well as runaway successes. Sure enough, though the Viseris would experience a brief half-ish decade of production, its spirit would live on long enough to bring us another example of Lampadati's dare to do different, no matter the cost nor quality.